You're listening to Cardiff City World on Cymru Sport Radio, live from the Welsh capital. The most interactive football show in Wales, featuring guests, fan opinion, and all the latest news surrounding Cardiff City. Have your say and get in touch now.
Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to Cymru Sport Radio. Welcome to the Cardiff City World Hour. Welcome to Cardiff City World if you're watching on video. We are having a bit of a different one this week. Instead of the top tier guests in the Cardiff City World, what do we call it? The forum, the world, whatever you want to say. I decided that I would get the fan. He is home and away every week, him and his family. And I wanted to bring Jamie on, and we're going to have a real good deep dive into Cardiff City season, the remainder of the season, what could potentially happen next year. Is a whole host of subjects, lots to discuss. And then going forward into the Welsh Football Hour from 8 o'clock, we have all things national team. We've got Ian G Hughes. We've got some words from Tom Lawrence and from Neco Williams. It's an exciting couple of hours. And we'll be keeping an eye on the under-19s with Wales as well. But with no further ado, let's welcome the first guest in Mr. G.
You're listening to Cymru Sport.
Welcome, Jamie. How are you, mates?
Feeling good, Si. How are you doing, mate? You okay?
I'm all right. It's a strange one, isn't it, mate? Because, like, you come out with that whole game a couple of weeks ago, it's all positive. You have a very, very tough period versus, Villa, who we play quite well. We play Burnley. We feel like, I personally felt like we could have won that game. Sunderland, same again. You feel like you could have got at least a draw, but because of other results elsewhere, it's very negative. Then the big one, the Luton game. It's like, this is it. Now we're going to turn up. We're going to outplay them. We're going to really go for it. And you could argue it was the worst performance of the year. It was a real damp squid. Everyone's down. And then we travel to Blackburn, who are going for the playoffs, who do seem to struggle with relegation teams, in fairness. But you go and get a result, and you also get that little moment of a penalty, which is not a penalty. But it's been a roller coaster, mate, the last couple of weeks, I think it's fair to say. But it's been like that at Cardiff probably for a few seasons, really.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at when things are going well this season, we go in like sort of little sort of clusters, don't we? So, you look back as far as January, we were doing brilliantly. We were kind of like riding a wave, so to say, thinking everything's going well, transfer window. Then you get done by 7 at Leeds. And all of a sudden, then you think, oh, my goodness, here we go again. Like, is this going to be a start of a bad run? You then lose against Portsmouth away, and you think, oh, my goodness, is another compounding thing. Get a few, like, sort of draws in there, and then all of a sudden you lose again. Now, emotionally, I think I was one of the first ones who was saying, and, it probably went a bit more viral than I liked, rightly or wrongly, but about why we change formations during games, which at times I think has been detrimental to the team. I know they're all in this together, so to say, but when you change formations, when you're probably not necessarily being hammered during games and you're well within a game, at which detriment is it? Is it detrimental to the team? And I think, again, inconsistent is the word I'd use for us this season. We've been well in games, even when we've lost against Burnley, respectively, who were flying. We were well in that game. We could have probably got something. So as much as the results have been poor, not always the performance has been poor. So I suppose it depends on which side the coin you're on. Are you on the the positive side or the negative side? But the fact still remains, no matter how you play, we're still only 1 point above relegation, and that is the most sort of worrying thing, especially now when we're in this international break, when ideally we probably want to be playing games to get away from it.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? Especially on the back of a win, you kind of want that Tuesday game then, and a couple of days later. I think on the plus side, by the time this international break comes to an end, Cardiff will have pretty much a full squad, I think, which is going to be interesting because that brings its own set of problems, because we will definitely have to leave out a couple of first team players from those match day squads. Which is another thing for him to balance in terms of keeping players happy. it's a bit strange when I felt in the Burnley game that if we could have put one of those chances away around the sort of 60, 70 minute mark, I felt like we'd probably go on and win it, because it felt like Burnley had kind of dropped down a couple of gears. We'd really picked up. And it's hard once you do drop down a couple of gears or you drop deep. It's hard to get back up if you do concede, which we've found time and time again. You know, those defensive lapses is what I call them. But like, they've cost us since Oxford. When you total up the amount of goals that have turned draws into losses and you know, wins into draws, we'd be well safe without those defensive lapses. And I think you're right about the performances as well, mate. You know, the Leeds game, unacceptable, of course. Absolutely disgraceful, really. You know, a good team, but even so. And the Luton game was a disappointing one for me. But outside those two, I think there's an argument you could make that the performances generally have been better. You can kind of see what they're trying to do. You can. The one thing for me is probably, generally speaking, is I can see patterns of play now, and I can see we look coached. We look like we've got a plan. My one sort of criticism, and I kind of, you touched on it, is I don't mind changing formations in the game. I'm slightly different to other people. Like I like that tactical adaptability, but it seems like whenever we score, we go very deep and encourage pressure. And so I don't mind going 3 or 5 at the back. That can be an attacking thing if done properly. But we seem to psychologically see it as a defensive thing. We drop back, we put pressure, and we change the whole momentum of the game to the opposition.
Yeah, and again, like, you know, I know the substitutes are called finishers or impact players and stuff like that. And so, you know, if you use that title of impact, you want them to have the positive impact, especially if they're coming off. You know, this is a 46-game season. You know, it is demanding when you've got FA Cup runs in there as well. So, you know, and games every 3 days. So there is a lot of pressure put on, you know, on the players. But sometimes when players are coming on, they're not having that desired impact. And again, you could look at it and say, it depends which side of the coin you're on. Again, is it the wrong player coming on? Is it the player not carrying out that instruction? Or is it they're given an instruction which is not necessarily going to get the best out of them? Like you said, are they going to be told to do defensive quality, defensive things when their main, sort of focus is attack? But I think it depends because, let's look at the most recent result of Blackburn. We did start very well. Then we had our ropey 20, 25 minutes. And again, you think to yourself, this game is probably here for the taking. Let's give Blackburn credit. They are where they are for a reason. But they're on a recent sort of slump themselves, a bit of an issue with them. But I think second half, and again, this is where I suppose you've got to credit the manager where it's due. Those changes, those impacts were the positive impacts. He brought fresh legs on. He brought the attacking changes on at the right times. And I think we were well deserved of our 2-1 victory at Blackburn. Yes, there's a contentious penalty there, but when he's trying to when he lent back to the second time in a few minutes and he's handballed it, credit where it's due. I normally slander the officials, but they got the right decision in my opinion at that time. But I think sometimes it's not about, like I said, in the position we're in now, it's not about playing brilliant football. That's secondary to what it is. We need wins. We need to get away from the position that we're in. Because it was not only, about 3-4 games ago that we were 7 points, 7 points clear of the relegation zone. We were on the highs of, the FA Cup going up to Villa Park. And then for whatever reason, be it against two great oppositions that they are throughout the season, we were unlucky to probably lose in both games. But unfortunately, when you don't pick up points, you leave yourself open to others doing it. And lo and behold, the joys of the championship, they did. And I think that's where we are now. Do I think that we'll get out of it? Yeah, probably. I think if we played like we did for especially the last half an hour up in Blackburn, I can't see a reason why not. But again, we have to concentrate on ourselves. We have to do things right ourselves. Because if we don't, we will be looking over our shoulders even more. And it's not a nice feeling when you're sat in the stands trying to watch a game and concentrate, and all of a sudden a score comes through from Plymouth or whatever and saying they're 1-0 up. Because as fans, it starts going round to the terraces, and you start feeling it, going, oh shit, we need to score. So again, the Championship's a brilliant league, isn't it? This is why we don't want to get out, don't want to be relegated, because what a league it is. But again, like I said, our club is like a roller coaster. This is why we support it, because it's never easy riding with our club, is it?
Yeah, it's never boring, mate. And you know, as someone who produces 7 days a week worth of content, it's obviously beneficial. But I mean, you know, I'd much rather be just talking about the football and analysing the football than the off the field sort of chaos, as it were. In terms of the Championship, though, mate, you are right? The Championship is a crazy league because outside of Tyree Stolen on Saturday, I didn't think Blackburn gave us a great deal of problems. And even that was more of a first half. He isolated Rena Motor a bit and they doubled up on Rena Motor. And we adjusted and we kind of, you know, stopped that. So I think, you know, again, people want to get on the manager and I understand it. He's done some things that I don't agree with. But I also think he's in this kind of almost impossible position where he's came in. It's not his team. It's no preseason for him to implement the way he wants to play. He's kind of got what he's got. He's brought in 3 really good signings in the January window who've all had an impact in different ways. And then also, I think, you know, compared to what we were seeing in that first 6 games, it's night and day. But the Championship is what it is. You can win against anyone. You can lose against anyone. We were 7 points clear of that relegation zone. And then Derby go and win 3 on the bounce. We've got to now go and win a couple on the bounce, whether that's against a team at the top of the league or the bottom of the league. And it's interesting. I spoke with someone, you know, in the club recently, just chatting, and they sort of said, like, you know, so much the fans and the media put so much pressure on the Luton game or the Stoke game or, you know, all these different games with the teams around us. And you know, it's understandable. But actually in the Championship, you can't beat anyone on your day if you're at your best. And sometimes for the team and the players, maybe it's easier to go and play a Burnley or a Sunderland because no one's expected you to do anything or to win the game anyway. But at this time of the season, it's all results. Obviously, respond to that, but also I want to dive into that penalty as well, just very quickly. But go on.
Yeah, again, as you said, is the 6-pointer analogy, isn't it? You know, that in itself creates this sort of negativity, this worry, this apprehension of, oh my goodness, you know, we must win at all costs, and all these comments, and they are, because ultimately I understand they're professionals and I understand it's their job, and I completely agree with that. But if we're feeling it as fans, because we live and breathe this football club, and we understand the probably the ramifications of if we don't win and we go down, that's a massive impact on any football club, but especially our own. But it's again, like when you're playing against these top tier sides, they're not going to just sit back for 90 minutes and let you play football. They are where they are because over, what is it now, 38 games or whatever it is now, they've earned the right to be at the top of the table and around that playoff area. But in that sort of, with that comes a bit of complacency, I think, from the top of the sides, because we can sit back, and I think our best thing is to sit back a little bit and then hit them on the counter. But again, like, you know, sometimes you do need that luck. And like you said, with the penalty decision that was awarded originally, but then overturned, maybe that is the luck that we need. And again, every game is, you've got to take on an individual basis. You know, previously to the game against Blackburn, we had the probably misfortune of hitting the crossbar with Callum Chambers' strike from outside the box. If that goes in, does it make it, you know, a game that we go on to win? If buts, maybes. But then we've shown some character, I think, and we've shown some, you know, bit of, you know what, to go up to Blackburn, a place that we haven't won in 12, 13 years, and actually get a result. And I think their fans after the game, when we were walking out, were saying, do you know what, you deserve it. And again, when you hear that after a game, you know, you kind of think, do you know what, we did. I think it was nice to see the players celebrated at the end. Okay, we haven't won a trophy. We haven't stayed up yet. But these small little things, these little moments, they bring a bit more confidence, a bit less pressure. And like I said, you live to fight another day, as the old saying goes. So hopefully we now look at Sheffield Wednesday in a week and a bit's time. And we go into that full of confidence, having a well-earned rest and thinking, right, this is the next block of games we need to attack.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a bit of criticism on social media from our fans about those celebrations, but to me, it's an emotional release. Like, they are human beings. There's a huge amount of pressure on them, and I think that combined with, a small sort of like 400 odd, I think it was 400 odd of you who travelled away. Like, they want to acknowledge and they want to celebrate with those fans who, for considering there's 400 versus several thousand Blackburn fans. It was the Cardiff fans you could hear throughout the game. It was the Cardiff fans who were getting behind their team. So I like it, mate. I do. I think it shows that they care. I see posts from people like Ollie Tanner. Like, he genuinely seems to really love being at the club. And I think the one thing which people also don't think about is there's now quite a large contingent in and around the first team who are Cardiff fans, who genuinely have, they've been at the club since they were young, but also, their families go, it's ingrained in them, same as you and me. So, like, they must feel that pressure more than anyone, you'd imagine, because they'll be desperately disappointed if the worst happens. So on the penalty, mate, it's interesting, right? Because when that penalty was given, straight away I said, no, that's never a penalty. Seen the replay, it was never, in a million years, it was never a penalty. Like, I couldn't even work out really what it was for, sort of thing. And the first thing which sprung to mind was the Chelsea goal when we're in the Premier League, when I think it was Azpilicueta was like 6 yards offside, no VAR. And we went down really off the back of that, because if we got, I think it was a point there, we probably stayed up. Well, that result effectively would have kept us up, because we were excellent against Chelsea that day. And then the next year, VAR comes in, and all I could think was, that's going to be the difference. That bit of bad luck is going to be the difference. We're going to go down on like goal difference or a point or something. And then next year they'll have VAR in the Championship and we'll be in League One. Now, that's not me saying I want VAR, because I absolutely don't want VAR. But my point being is, it just felt like that moment of, when things just go against you. And then all of a sudden, the linesman does what linesmen never do and actually says, no, ref, you've got it wrong. And fair play to him, because, particularly in their stadium with all their players, everyone's in their ears. For the linesman to have the backbone and the stones to go, no, it's not a penalty. It's a big decision, but it was the right decision in the end.
Yeah, and again, it's like, with us, when you're attacking the end where, your sort of more vocal fans are, you can be influencing the referee. And that sounds daft, but, players can get in officials' ears, management can as well. I think there was an incident probably about 5 minutes before that where the same chap, they hung up the cross. He was leaning back. He kept doing it all game. And when they're 2-1 down, they're desperate. He's leaning back, and I think he's trying to get that contact from a defender. And again, like I said, I think the initial reaction was, here we go again. We were kind of thinking that's soft. We're down the opposite end to it, so we don't really know what it's been given for, if it's the foul or anything like that. But again, you give credit where it's due. I mean, that was the referees, I believe, when we looked him up before the game. I think it was only his 6th game in the Championship. He'd been promoted from the National League this season, so he's been around the EFL this season. So you could put it down to an experience or what have you in his defence. But the fact of the matter is, you give the massive credit there to the linesman, the assistant referee, who's actually gone, right, if there's any doubt in that decision that you've given, you can't give it. And again, I think you look back on it, I've listened to Ishmael and stuff like that. They've not actually complained about it. So when the home team have lost and they're not complaining about it, you pretty much know that, again, you can't go up with your hands in the air and expect to fall back and kind of get away with it. It's silly. But again, whether that's a turning point or not for us, it remains to be seen. But, 3 points was huge on the back of the week and the 3 days leading up to it, because, I, for one, I thought going to Blackburn, any result in terms of the draw would have been brilliant. We've got a torrid record there. So to go up there and get all 3, regardless of how we played, and at this time of the season as well, the business end of the season, I think, is, the credit goes to the whole team, that the coaching staff and whatever, because again, there's no God-given way or right way to win a football match. We all like to see this passing football. but we've tried passing out for the back, and it's detrimental to ourselves at times. So sometimes you just got to do the basics and the fundamentals well enough to win that game. And I think overall we did.
Yeah, we did. That's what it's, and it's just about points at this stage. So in the next part of the show, mate, I would like to look forward to the next 8 games, 8 cup finals, as it were. But me and Jamie will be back in just a second.
Cymru Sport.
Welcome back. This is Cardiff City World live on Cymru Sport Radio. Myself and Cardiff City fan Jamie Anderson having a deep dive into Cardiff City. And next up, we're going to look towards those last 8 games for Cardiff City. And, as they've been described by me and many others, they are effectively 8 cup finals. And it's interesting, Jamie, you mentioned the torrid record that we have at Blackburn. We also don't have a very good record at Preston North End, one of the teams which we will be meeting over that 8-game period. But next up, we have Sheffield Wednesday at home. You would like to think that that'll be, it's a 3:00 kickoff Saturday. You'd like to think that every man and their dog will be there from Cardiff, and it will be a hostile, bouncing atmosphere after the international break. I appreciate there's been certain games this year where the atmosphere has been sensational. But there's also been games, more so the midweek games, and these games at 12:30 on a Saturday, which are on Sky, where the atmosphere has probably not been at the level that it has been and should be. How do you feel that Sheffield Wednesday game? Is that a game that you've, like, on paper, you're targeting? I know we want to win every game, but when you go through, every fan does it, go through the fixtures, where are we going to pick up our points to stay up? Is that a game that you're looking at where you think Cardiff could pick up 3?
Yeah, I think we touched upon it earlier on when we looked at Burnley, for example. They're a side that are, in the top half of the table that will be expected to come to us and win. They've got, a former Bluebird in Callum Patterson there, which I'm sure will get a good reception. But they're going to bring a sold out away, and that in itself creates atmosphere. So I think home fans will, naturally, fight back off that. I think 3:00 kickoffs now, they're not tradition anymore. Sky TV, unfortunately, has ruined the schedule. So, hopefully the Canton stand will be bouncing, because there'll be parents there that have got their, that can attend because their children aren't playing more, football in the mornings, etc. But it's a big game. And there's one I'm targeting, as with any home game, that we've got to get points in. What's the old saying? Win your home games, and anything on the road is a bonus. And again, it's only, I don't mean to be disrespectful to Sheffield Wednesday, but we went up to their place and I thought we were very good value, albeit earlier on in the season. We probably should have won it there. I think they've got their own vulnerabilities. And I think if we, again, it's our stadium, if we apply ourselves to the correct standard and win our battles, I think you're halfway there to getting a result. But again, it works hand in hand, doesn't it? If the players aren't performing on the pitch, and giving the fans something to get off their seats for, then the atmosphere naturally takes a decline. But the fans then, we do, like we did in Blackburn the other day, we'll sing our hearts out, and we then hope and expect, in a way, that the players actually give all their efforts out on that pitch. Because for me, that's the least you should be doing, is give it all, win your battles, put your body on the line. And at the end of the day, at least if we don't win, which, I am hoping we do, that we can accept that, if that makes sense, leave it all out there. Don't come off a pitch with any regrets. And like I said, hopefully at the end of that game, come 5:00, we'll be praising and celebrating a victory that will hopefully, increase the gap as such. Let's hope, from the relegation zone.
Yeah, ultimately, I think I said a couple of weeks ago, if we do go down, let's not go down with a whimper. Let's go down fighting and, make sure that that everyone's putting a shift in. And I think, by and large, the attitude and the attitude of the players probably since Risa took over, but certainly since that Oxford game, because the Christmas period was rough. But since that Oxford game, by and large, I think the attitude of the players has been, way better. And I can't think of many games where I've been questioning the attitude. Now, the application and the focus, that's probably a slightly different thing. As we mentioned, those defensive lapses have been, an issue. One thing that's been levelled at Omar Risa is that maybe he's got favourites within the squad who he doesn't drop. And then you have informed players who kind of come in when there's injuries, but then a drop straight away. Obviously, the obvious one being kind of Gutas and Fish. Where do you stand on that? Because I know people whose opinion I respect greatly, say that Gutas should be playing every game because he's kind of like that sort of leader. He puts his body on the line, etc. But I'm also a big believer that informed players are informed players. And Will Fish, I don't think, has put many bad performances in.
No, and first and foremost, in the 1.5 season, 1 3/4 seasons, Gutas has been here. On the whole, I think yes, he's had a few lapses, but I think he's been fairly consistent, and he's brilliant with my daughter. And you know what? Like I said, there are moments, and unfortunately, when you're a defensive player, and most of the time, when a defender messes up, it leads to a goal. And again, did he deserve to be dropped the other day? Well, unfortunately, that's Riz's choice, and it paid off to an extent. I think Will Fish has been brilliant. He's a youngster. The way I'm kind of looking at it is, and maybe that's completely polar opposite to other people, is as much as I love Gutas, I think Fish is playing really well, and Fish is also contracted next season. So why not give Fish the exposure now in such a hard battle that if we do stay up, and hopefully we do, he's already had that championship experience. So you know what you're getting next season with a contracted player. Obviously, with Gutas's position and predicament at the minute, there's no contract, there's nothing agreed, and the general consensus is he's probably gonna go back to Greece, and that's fine. And you thank him for his service, but again, I think it's a collective defensively. I think we've had moments of concentration or lapse. Like you say, it's not necessarily Inamota's fault for the Blackburn first goal, but Sivert could be helping him out there, for example, from the right sort of central midfield position. But they have been costly moments that, unfortunately, this season have cost us points. Sunderland away, leading up with a City free kick, not tracking a man. These are things when you're on the pitch, you need your leaders to step up and to sort of marshal everyone else. And Gutas leaves it all out on the pitch. Now, sometimes there are errors, but again, if Will Fish doesn't play against Sheffield Wednesday, I'm sure Will Fish will be knocking on the Omar Riz's door and asking, well, what have I done to deserve sitting on a bench again? So I would probably play Will Fish on the basis, I think, the last game against Blackburn, the performance he played against Aston Villa, and the games I've seen him feature, I think he's done quite well for especially for a youngster that's on the ascendancy in his career.
Yeah, his distribution, his passing, those long diagonals that he puts out to the wingers is a real sort of asset to the team, I think, as well. It's interesting. I've got a video coming out later, probably next week now, on Joel Bagan, because it's been a real breakout season for Joel. I think he's had a strange start to his Cardiff career. He sort of came in, looked like, wow, he's going to be a real sort of one for the future. Then he kind of got a criticism and went off the boil, went on loan a couple of times. And a lot of people, in the chats and the videos that we do, in the comments and in the summer, he was someone who people either wanted to sell or were sort of like, oh, if he goes sort of thing. And I think he's been sensational. Like, I really do. I thought he was very unlucky to be dropped the other week after one mistake. And whether he's played left back, and I actually think he's been a massive asset since he's gone in at centre back, because he just opens up the whole of that side of the pitch when you are looking to pass it. But I'm so happy for him because I think he's got a great attitude and a great way of playing. He's really aggressive, good on the ball. And I think going forward, it'll be interesting because you've got him, who's like a left footer, but seems to be doing very well at centre back. You've obviously got Fish. You've got Gutas, who's been there all season. Darland, who started really well for Cardiff and then maybe struggled a little bit with the physicality of the Championship, which I think was to be expected. But people get carried away, as is, life with social media, I guess. But then you also, I think, Perry Ng's return to form coincided with him, because when he first came back from injury, I thought he struggled a little bit. He went into centre-back as a 3 and then in a 2 with Fish against Hull and was very, very good. And then he sort of took that form, into his right back duties. And then just lastly on that, you've also got Dylan Lawler, who came in against Villa and was sensational. Did look like he played there for 15 years, like he was, just at that level forever. So I think we've got an abundance of young, hungry, but most importantly, quality centre backs. I think we will, if Gutas does leave, I think we'll need to bring in one sort of championship proven old head, maybe even someone who doesn't want to play every week, but someone just to guide those players, because they're all quite under 25, say, just to guide them into the weekly rigors of championship football.
Yeah, and again, I suppose testimony to all the youngsters, that have either had to force their way through a development plan, whether that's going out on loan to Belgium or whether that's going into lower leagues. It goes to show they've got a work ethic and they've got an attitude that, hopefully is starting to show, the rewards for. Joe Bagan is, again, he's had to take that upon himself. He had the 3-3 goals. I think it was under Steve Morrison or someone that when he did the celebration, the 3. But he's had adversity, isn't he? He's had to forge his way. And again, he's been utilised probably correctly now, because you can have him on the left back position, you can have it. And you can't have too many players in the team that can play multiple positions, because like you said, if there's injuries that come along, it's a simple fit, push him out wide and so on and so forth. I think defensively this season, we have been a bit rocky. Whether that's because of the constant changing, whether that's because of injuries, or whether that's just because, some of our players maybe aren't physically built as much, as well as say some strikers. That may be the case. But again, what I do like is you've got, like you said, you've got sort of mentorship there, because I'm sure that Dimitri Gutas, even though he was sat on the bench against Blackburn, he'd be the first one talking to Will Fish, and he'd be the first one speaking to Joe Bagan about, right, what can you do to deal with this big physical striker, and again, it's all about learning development with the youngsters. They are going to be making mistakes. Hopefully it's not to the detriment of us in a relegation battle that is costing us points, because no one wants that. But, again, with Gutas, what you hope is that if people aren't in the team, they've got the right attitude, that they're still, singing off the same hymn sheet and saying, do you know what, I'm going to support my fellow players and help us get out of the position we're in.
Indeed, mate. You made mention of, the young players. Obviously, Will Fish went out and played a couple of years in Scotland on loan when he was at United. So he has got that sort of the physical experience of men's football, which I think has probably helped him. One thing I would like to discuss in the next segment, mate, is those young players, because there's a lot of people who are kind of the opinion that some of these guys should be given the opportunity to play more, and it's an interesting one, should we say the least.
You're listening to Cardiff City World on Cymru Sport Radio, live from the Welsh capital. The most interactive football show in Wales, featuring guests, fan opinion, and all the latest news surrounding Cardiff City. Have your say and get in touch now.
Welcome back. I'm Si. This is Cymru Sport Radio, and I'm talking to Jamie all about Cardiff City. For this next part of the show, we're going to have a little look at the young players in and around the first team. Some in the first team, sort of, solid players who are well settled in the first team. Some who have dipped in and out. The interesting thing for me is you've got. So let's start. You've got Ian Ashford, who I think has been excellent this year. I feel that he is very unlucky to not be in the side at the moment. And I think, again, going back to what we said earlier about those homegrown players, I would imagine that Ian's really frustrated at the moment because he was in good form. And what I like about him is he does a good defensive work as well as good forward work. So I get a lot of messages and comments from people who watch the stuff. They say, Ian Ashford on one side, Isaac Davis on the other side. These are the two who should be our starting wingers because they're good going forward. They're pacey. They work hard. They care about the club, etc. But we also get people who say, why isn't Alex Robertson playing? Why isn't Ruben in the 10? Why isn't Dylan Lawler playing? Why aren't we playing Louis Giles? I understand why they say that, because none of those players really let us down ever. Even on Saturday, I saw a lot of criticism for Ruben. On the ball probably wasn't his day, but he worked so hard. I saw someone say on social media, someone, he's so lazy. And I was like, are you watching the same game as me? Because he was literally, in that last 20 minutes, he was literally sprinting from right wing to left wing to right wing. And I don't see it. But anyway, like in terms of those young players, do you buy into that all of them should kind of be given more opportunities? Or do you think the situation we're in, we have to, dip them in and out?
Yeah. I think it all depends on the scenario, doesn't it? I think if we were safe, and I know it's if, buts, maybes, I would be the first one probably shouting, where are the likes of Dylan Lawler? Why aren't we giving them, the exposure like we did, a good few years ago when towards the end of the season we were playing the likes of Eli King and so on and so forth. But again, I think we need to get safe first, because the impact on the club as a whole, financially, and with people with their jobs, etc. If you drop from Championship League One, that's a massive deduction in income and so on. So I think I'm of the opinion, and it is only my opinion, I'd love to see them there. I'd love to see them in the team, but you've got to blend that mix. You've got to get that mix right. I mean, you can't have, say, 10 youngsters to one experienced player. It needs to be the right mix. Now, that's not to say that Cian Ashford doesn't deserve to start, because I believe, like you touched upon there, I think when he came in and he started playing a few games from the off, he actually set the tone for some of the senior players who weren't exactly playing particularly well. So when you see a youngster giving 110%, as an experienced player, you've got to match that. You can't go hiding, because that's not non-comprehensible. You can't be doing that. The likes of, like you say, Dylan Lawler, he will have his time. I mean, he's playing now for the Wales 19s. He is on his ascendancy. He showed his maturity beyond his years against Aston Villa. So we know what he can do. Isaac Davis, I mean, I take my hat off to him that, he's not had the greatest of seasons because of the injuries and the frustration he suffered through these injuries. But when he's came off the bench, he is provided with, I think, especially on Saturday, a great impact, because his enthusiasm, his work rate, all the fundamentals that we demand as fans, Isaac ticks those boxes and goes beyond them. He harries defenders, he tries, he gets stuck in. And I think Isaac Davis, can definitely have a pivotal part to play towards the end of the season, especially if he is coming off the bench, because I think he's going to make the positive impact. To touch upon what you said about Ruben Colwill, I think we've seen a change of Ruben, because I think work rate and, the physicality was probably questioned at times, especially through the middle part of the season where maybe things weren't going too well. I'd like to see him win a few more headers, by all means. Again, naturally, you want to see, people winning headers, kicking and screaming. But I think at times he's probably doing too much. But that's not a bad thing. I think that just shows he really cares about the club. He really wants to do it. And for someone so young, again, that's praise. But I think he just, again, at times it's just, right, don't take that extra touch, Ruben. Release that ball. And I think maybe that's where the frustration lies, is he taking maybe too many touches and then almost running down an alley where he can't get out of. But work rate, effort, application from all these youngsters and maturity, I think, when the time comes, whether that's like against Sheffield Wednesday or whether that's against, let's say West Brom home, wherever it may be, I think they will definitely make the right impact. And I think they will be chomping at the bit to perform well for, like you said, their club, their supporters. Like, they've come through our ranks. And again, you can never have too many people who love the club and have come through the ranks, because at the end of the day, it's a great story, isn't it?
Absolutely, mate. I've actually got a video out tomorrow at 7:30 tomorrow evening. It's part 2 on a little series on Ruben, just kind of looking at and analysing, where he is and things like that, because I think he's fast become a bit of a scapegoat in the second half of the season for some people, almost like Siopis left, so they need someone else to blame, which I get it. It's the social media age. He has got things to improve, but I just think of all the problems at Cardiff City, he's quite low down on the list in terms of like being a problem. But what I wanted to sort of delve into a little bit off the back of what we just talked about, but the whole conversation really, mate, is I want to give you a little hypothetical. We go in to the next couple of games. We've got Sheffield Wednesday home, and who's after that? I can't even think off the top of my head. QPR, sorry, I was thinking it's Preston. QPR away. So, hypothetically, everybody's fit for both those games. How are you lining up for the home game and the away game? Because my one concern is that I worry that Omar is going to focus too much on the physicality and the battle aspect and the fighting aspect, which you need. And we're going to become a bit one-dimensional, like just lumping it up to Salic, to Mate. Whereas I actually think our best asset is pace in the wide areas. But I'm interested in what you would do first. So home game to Sheffield Wednesday, everyone's fit. Away game to QPR, everyone's fit. System and players.
I think they're two different type of games. I mean, you're playing at home on a big pitch. You want to use that pace. You want to utilize that pace. You want to get in behind a Sheffield Wednesday defense that you can probably find, like we did in the away game, a lack of pace at times. They've got a very good manager who is great at tactical. He's been touted around as possibly the next Southampton manager. I think that sort of game, you've got to have a good mixer. You can't go one-dimensional, but I'm not saying go direct, but don't try and start passing out from the back and hoping that you're going to score a 25-pass goal, because that won't happen. That they've got great players like Barry Bannon who just simply works his backside off, and you will not get passes through him. So I think with that, you've got to be a bit cautious. You've got to go over a bit more off Salic and then hope you can have pace around him to pick off those pockets. Now, fully fit, I think, again, you talked about earlier on, playing almost like the hot hand. You've got to play Salic. I think he's one of the first names on the sheet. He does both get parts of his game well. He's now starting to get, show his physicality. He's starting to learn more about the Championship, how the referees are operating, how the other teams are operating. But what he does do, which I think is very clever, is he tires their defenders. He puts himself about and he tires them around. So when the likes of Isaac Davis or other players come on around, they're playing against tired defenders. So ultimately they can have a better impact. Now, let's look at QPR away. Tight, cramped ground. They've got some shorter sort of Elias Chair type of players who love playing football, getting in and around the pockets. Now, when we played them a few years ago, we tried passing the ball and it was to our detriment. Like, they were on us. So I think you've got to go direct. Now, I'm not saying be a Stoke City by any means, play for set pieces and sort of bully people, because that won't happen. Sides will be able to park the bus against us and hit us on the counter. But I think you've got to almost have the right type of central area players. The wingers, they need service, no matter if you're playing, whether you're playing Isaac Davis out there, whether you're playing Will Alves out there. There's no point having those wingers if your central midfielders aren't great at distributing the ball. So I think you've got to have a mix of, do you play Sivert and Chambers and then say an Alex Robertson as an advanced player? Or do you then do the opposite of that and then say you play one of the two, sort of 6 and 8, and then go more attacking? But I genuinely think, especially the Sheffield Wednesday game, it's going to be I'm hoping it's not a slow burner where they're going to try and cancel us out. And it feels like both managers are going to, they're both young managers, aren't they? They're going to try and sort of play a bit of chess and see who makes the first move. But again, we're not in a position to be almost trying to be the next Pep Guardiola, if that makes sense. You've got to win the battles. You've got to be fundamentally sound, and the result will follow off the back of that. You could have 11 attackers on the pitch, but if you can't pass a ball 5 yards, you're not gonna be able to get a positive result.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree with you more, mate. Like, for the home game, I would like to see us go with like that sort of 4-2-3-1 and go with like a 6 and an 8. Probably go with, for that game, I'd probably go Chambers, maybe even Turnbull and Robertson. Even because people forget Turnbull and Robertson as a two was when we had our best period of the season. Because Turnbull's really good. He's quite good defensively, but he always looks to pass it forward. And then I would be looking to get maybe Ruben in the 10, and then maybe Alves and Kian as your wingers, and then bring on Isaac, as the game and the defenders get tired with Callum Robertson. Salis would be my striker. And, I'd probably go with O'Dowda at left back with Bagan and Fish and, NG, or maybe even, Rina Mota. I'd be happy with that. I'd like to see us go and try and win that football match. But then that away game, going against a lot of like those fundamental things that I would like to see from this Cardiff team. I agree with you. It's a small pitch, and QPR, the way they set up, if we try and set up with a 6 and an 8, or even a single pivot or something like that, I think we'll struggle. And I think that's where you go with Chambers and Seivert, and then maybe you go with either Colwell or Robertson. I'd probably leave Ruben off the bench there, go with Robertson, and I'd actually, and people will be shocked by this, I would actually play Salic and Mate up front with O'Dowda as a wing back, and I'd go 3 at the back. O'Dowda as a wing back. I'd like to see probably Kian, but either Kian or Isaac as the right wing back for that game. Someone who's just going to go up and down relentlessly, because you've got the 3 defenders and the 2 defensive midfielders. If they do switch off, or they do kind of, get caught up the field, there's enough players to get across and cover, you would think. But, I wouldn't be against going with that physical presence up the top.
It's hard, side, because when you look at QPR, I think their success this year, they started off very poorly, and people were kind of looking at them going, are they going to be going down? Cifuentes was given a new contract, and people were like, why have you given him a new contract? But I think when you take time to let these players sort of get cohesiveness with them, they've got a big striker. I think his name is Fry, is it, or something like that? He is not afraid to put himself around. So again, you've got to kind of fight fire with fire in an extent and go, right, what type of player are we playing? Because as much as we look at ourselves, like you said earlier about, sort of the analysts and of that, of the other team, you can't ignore their threats as well. You've got to have somebody that will be able to counteract that. Like you said, David Turnbull can take a bit of pressure off, say, Alex Robertson, because he's got the ability to be able to spring the ball left and right, which then may allow an Alex Robertson to maybe sort of step off a little bit instead of having to gravitate to the ball because he feels like it's all on him to pass the ball. But again, I suppose having these players back now, touch wood, having these players back, having these options is less of a stressor for the manager to an extent, because you think you need fresh legs. You can't be overloading these players at this time of season, because unfortunately, if they're not fully fit, there's no point playing them, because they will break down. They will be like with Rinamoto, I think, and Ralls the other game. They gave their all, but it could possibly have been at the detriment of the team, because ultimately they both had to come off for their injuries, and hopefully, touch wood, they are, precautionary. But you need to be at it for 95, 100 minutes, because you can't be given, like, I think all season we've given silly free kicks away. We've given, we've given, easy sort of ins to our box. And again, when you're not necessarily stopping crosses, you need to be sure that your goalkeeper's going to come off the line and claim crosses. You need to make sure that your centre halves, for example, are going to be heading and kicking and blocking everything. And again, it's like one big dance, isn't it? You don't just set, football is not, right, that's your position, you stay in that position. You all need to sort of gravitate and go across the pitch accordingly. If one person's off, you're going to struggle, because then that means someone's got to do your job and their own. So again, I think the fundamentals have to be done to a very, very good standard, and then you build off that. And again, as the game goes on, you react to how the game goes on. If, for example, Sheffield Wednesday's left back is feeling his hamstring, right, Isaac Davis, you get on and you go at him. And again, I think let's not sit back. That's what we don't want to see. We want to see fight. We want to see passion. We want to see, our team show us why they want to stay up in the league, because fans are, again, I think we've sold out for QPR away. Fans are still traveling in numbers. Fans are still turning up in numbers to get behind their team. Now, hopefully the players, like you said, there's 8 cup finals left. Let's not, just because it's Sheffield Wednesday or it's QPR or just because it's Stoke, it's only Stoke. No. You take every game as an individual basis. You head, you kick, you block, you do everything you can and leave it all out on there. And I think we'll be in a better position than what we see ourselves at the minute.
Absolutely. And I think we played Arsenal in a friendly today. I know that Jesper Darland and Di Turnbull got some minutes in their legs. I'm not sure about Alex Robertson. I would like to think he got a little bit of time, but I don't know if he's gone to Australia for the international break or not, or with the Australian team. But like Alex Robertson, I actually feel quite sorry for. He's taken a bit of criticism, probably fair criticism in the last few games, because he hasn't been as influential as he was. But actually, I think he rushed back after his injury. He's got a long-term sort of hamstring issue anyway. I think he rushed back from the injury. You could see against Hull when he came on, he was way off the pace and he was knackered after 10 minutes. But I think he did rush back. And then I think he's just struggled to find that rhythm. I also feel for him because I think his best position is probably a bit deeper, but he'd done a job for us at a 10 because we wanted slightly more aggressive press. But the one good thing, Jamie, is the depth of the squad looks pretty good. Like there's options there wherever you look. And then even if there is some sort of defensive frailties, there's options there now as well coming back. And you've also got those young players as well. I think just to finish us off, really, a few people have mentioned in the comments this evening about fullback being a weak part for us. Like Callum O'Dowda, for me, is one of our best players this year. I think he's probably nailed on for Player of the Year, to be fair. Unless Salic probably goes and scores like 5 or 6 more and keeps us up, then, fair enough. But I think with O'Dowda, I think his attitude and the way he is with fans, his performances on the pitch, just his general demeanour, he cares. And I think that's what fans are looking for. And he's been pretty good this year. But he's not a left back. He is a left winger. And it's difficult then because you've got a left winger playing. And I think Joe Bagan and Will Fish in particular have been so patient this year because in another season, they've both played 30 games from start because of how well they've played. But it's just for different reasons. Players have been in front of them. Obviously, Perry NG was in not the best form. We've gone with Rina Mota largely for this season, who I think has done a real good job, but is a midfielder by trade. So it's difficult. And I thought just before he had that injury recently, I thought he looked like he was struggling mentally and physically a little bit, like he'd played too much football. But he's also a midfielder. Do you feel that's an area that Cardiff need to improve in the summer? Or do you think that they're just filling a gap until the likes of Capacchio and Giles hopefully push through to the first team in the next year or so?
I think you have to look at if you can add to it, you need to. I think, some people have said square pegs, round holes, at times this season. You could look at it again, like I said about the coin earlier on. You could look at it and say credit due where it should be for Andy Rinomota, who was, sort of at Rotherham this time of last year, not got a future at the club, hasn't moaned, and all of a sudden he's slotting in at right back. And again, for someone who's not in a natural position, vastly, he did very, very well against some really, really good wingers. But I think, like you said, of late, he's probably feeling it, the amount of minutes he's played. As for left back situation, O'Dowd given his all. Unfortunately for him at times over the years, he's had knocks because of for various reasons. But I just feel like the amount of goals we've probably conceded from crosses not being stopped, and from the fullbacks maybe being sort of too inverted, whether that's systematic or whether that's just because they're so tired, etc. There probably needs to be it probably needs looking at. I think for me, Capacchio is brilliant. Again, he suffered that injury, unfortunately for him. Louis Giles, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a great whipped in ball, and he's strong defensively, as we saw at Villa. But again, when is the right time to put them in? I definitely say, put them in the matchday squad as a because the more experience they get, the better. But maybe with the club over the last few seasons, they've kind of, instead of recruited, say, we're going to get this player, we're going to get that player, they've looked at internals and gone, well, Perry can play this position. So if there's a right back that goes down, we're just going to slot him across. And I think at times maybe that's been detrimental. But again, if we can get a good right back and a good left back to steward and to mentor these two youngsters coming through, it can't do any harm, can it?
Absolutely not, mate. And I think just to round us off nicely, going into the Welsh Football Hour next, there's a lot of talk about the manager situation. Ultimately, for me, I think, if they were going to make a managerial change, they've left it too late now anyway. They should have done it after the Oxford game. I believe Omar Risa has done a decent job under the circumstances, but not an amazing job. But I'm also of the belief that with a little bit more application at certain times from the players, we could be looking at very different statistics. Because if you go back from Oxford to today, those late goals really have shaped the season. Wins, the draws. I think it was the Coventry game we were absolutely in control of. We were 1-0 up. Callum Robinson gets sent off early in the second half. They score straight away, and then it's a different game because you're hanging on. Plymouth dominating the game. Gutas gets sent off, and then it's a different game. But there's also those late goals as well. So I think, look, it's fine margins, staying up, going down, draw, win. It's going to be interesting. I would say people who think or assume that Omar Risa is going to go in the summer, I think maybe in for a shock. Now, I say that because if we go down, he's probably for the lack of a better term, the cheap option. And if we stay up, you could argue that he's earned it. I believe that I think I said this the other day, I think he's the right guy at the wrong time. And that with a full preseason and season, I think this season would have been different. But I also believe that he needed someone experienced with him to help him through the job, because this is his first big job. Where do you stand on Omar Risa's performance as manager, from October to now and beyond?
Well, I think you look at it as a whole this year, again, like you just alluded to there, it's been a mixed bag. When things have gone well, against Swansea, for example, at home, they've gone very well. And we think, wow, we've got this young, progressive, hungry manager. And, we've cracked it. We finally cracked the habit of having experience, etc. And then at times that maybe that, I know the term's been brandished around, so I'm only going to quote it. And I know Omar doesn't like necessarily having that, but where, certain journalists have said the inexperience in him has maybe caused him to, implement changes or players' lapse of concentration. It's all a collective at the end of the day. I know we're 46 games this season, so I think, say 39 or whatever. Was it 30? I think it was 6 games, wasn't it? The bullet was after he was sacked. So 33, let's say, games he's had. We are where we are because of how we've played. Do I feel that he's the right man to go forward? I'm not too sure. He's a lovely human being. And again, if you speak to, he's probably too approachable, if anything, and probably too open. And as a human being, you can't fault that. But, it's that old saying, isn't it? Certain times, nice people don't always win football games and things like that. It's too late, in my opinion, to make a change right now, because the reason why I'm sitting on the fence with it, so to say, is who else is going to come in for 8 games and make this massive turn of events and learn the players, learn the club, etc. I don't think anyone is. And if you were going to make a change now, you've got to live by the sword and die by it ultimately. And they had the opportunities to possibly make changes at back January, whatever, and they opted not to. I think what Riz has done very well is as he calls it, he's managed up. He's managed to speak to, say, Vincent Tan, and he's got that constant dialogue with him, which has probably gone down very well with Vincent, because I think his interferences annoyed managers in the past, and they've probably gone, get out of here. But Omar hasn't done that. And I think, again, there are going to be terms brandished around whether he's a goody two-shoes or whatever for doing that. But he's done that, and it's put him in the good books with Vincent. If he survives, if he keeps us up, then hats off to him. Well done, fair play. but where do we go from here? I don't think it's just an Oma situation. I think the club need a big look at themselves and go, how do we, as a club, keep progressing or try to progress? And I think there's a lot more off the field, things that need doing, more than the manager, if anything, because I just don't think that there's a plan in place. It's very short-term thinking at times, as opposed to putting these plans in place. And again, whether that's because of the results on the pitch, we could argue this year that we brought in on paper a brilliant squad. Yes, that may be the case, but games aren't won on paper. So there's something that's not gone right this season for whatever reason. But that's just Cardiff City, isn't it? That's the pantomime that we are. That's why we love and support our club. It's because we're not winning every week. If we wanted that, we'd go and support the big boys in the Premier League, wouldn't we? But this is our club. And again, we want the best for our club. Our fans continue to support, and they keep showing their passion, and credit to them. And again, like you said, to end, 8 massive cup finals. Let's give our all. Let's turn up like we are as fans. And hopefully, by when we play Norwich away, we're all in the away end in silly fancy dresses, and we're not having to worry about results going on, or that we're in League One. We're actually safe and we're having a good time.
Absolutely, mate. Couldn't have put it better myself. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me this evening for the Cardiff City Hour. Really appreciate it, mate. I'm sure we'll see each other soon. But up next is the Welsh Football Hour, where I'll be joined by Ian G Hughes. Just after this break, we'll hear from Tom Lawrence on his emotional return to the Welsh squad as well. So stay tuned in, and we'll see you in just a second.
If you're hearing this, so are your potential customers. Be heard and reach sports fans across the country. We have advertising opportunities available throughout our programmes, website and commentaries. Working with you, we will create a bespoke package and make sure your message reaches the people you want to hear it. Contact us today to find out how Cymru Sport could help your business. Email contact@cymrusport.cymru.
Yeah, just really happy, excited to be part of it again. Like you say, it's been a long time. Yeah, I'd say sometimes I thought I won't play for Wales again. But this manager's been brilliant since he come in. He rang me when he first got the job, and he's kept in contact ever since. So it's been brilliant. Yeah.
What have those conversations been like then, and how much did it mean to you that as soon as he was in, you were having those conversations, he was giving you the impression that you were very much a part of the plan going forward? How much did that mean to you?
Yeah, it meant a lot, especially with being out for 4 years, I think it is now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Si. This is the Welsh Football Hour live on Cymru Sport Radio. And we have all things Welsh national team to discuss. We'll be keeping one eye on the under-19s game, as well as discussing a host of other subjects around the national team. But first and foremost, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Ian G Hughes to the show. Ian, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you very much.
No, I'm really looking forward to it, mate. It's one of them where we've been trying to schedule it and organising it, but I'm delighted to have you on the show. It's an exciting time at the moment for Welsh football, from the first team to the 19s playing as we speak. How does it feel to be right in the mix of that, and is it as exciting within the camps as it is from the outside?
Yeah, it is very exciting. I'm joining you now. I'm at the Vale at the team hotel. We've been here since Sunday, and Craig and the coaching staff and some of the senior players are watching the under-19s now on the big screen. And yes, it's an exciting time. With the women qualifying as well, but from the men's perspective, there's no doubt that the excitement, enthusiasm, expectation has risen due to Craig's nature, both as what's happened on the field as well as off the field, whether it's his press conferences or travelling around Wales, meeting and discussing with fans. And I think that's, we got together on Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, the first thing as staff, and he talks to the staff, tells us what he expects for the week, sets the goals out, the standards and what have you, and then the players on Sunday evening and Monday. And after you've spent that time with him, you just feel like, you know, you do anything to succeed in this campaign, never mind these 2 games. And that's just for staff, never mind how the players will feel. And, you know, I think they certainly respond to Craig, and it's a very exciting time. I've been lucky. I've been involved, you know, in terms of the FAW and with the team since Gary was appointed. Gary, Chris Coleman, Ryan Giggs, Pagey, and you know, I always find it's an honour, a privilege to be doing the work that I'm doing, and I always get excited about it. I used to get excited about it as a commentator, even when we were going through the bad period, because you never know. You always live in hope, but now there's more the expectation. But yeah, it's as exciting inside as it is outside, to be honest.
It's really interesting because something that you just to pick up on something you said there straight away is when we did the evening with Craig down in Splott.
Yeah.
Myself and a lot of people who I spoke to afterwards, you know, the feedback from the people who were in attendance was, you know, they were like, I would run through a brick wall for him now. So if he can get that same sort of reaction from the players, this could be, you know, a really interesting time for Welsh football. And that was before he'd got together with the players, before they kicked the ball. So I think his passion and his love for it rubs off immediately when you speak to him. And I think that has continued throughout all his press conferences. And obviously he's gone around different places and spoke to fans as well. Yeah. But that, I think ultimately, the term I used was that he talked the talk when he first came into the job, but it was that first game where he kind of walked the walk, where everyone was like, wow, he's done exactly what he said he was going to do. Yeah. And I think that was difficult in itself. Obviously, it's a massive job anyway, but just because of the amount of time that he'd had with the players before that, you could only imagine the additional work that it felt like he must have put in talking to the players on an individual basis to get them knowing what he expected.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were up in Pwllheli the other day, and there were 400 people there in the Dwyfor and 150 children that he met before on the rec at Pwllheli Football Club. And, you know, the purpose of these events is that Craig goes around Wales to talk to the fans and to understand as well, you know, what effort it takes to come down from North or Mid Wales or whatever to Cardiff. Plus, you know, in terms of identity, what identifies you as Welsh maybe is different in Newport, Cardiff to somewhere like Pwllheli or Anglesey. But also, I think he gets the chance to give his side of the preparation, how he wants to play. And I think then when as you say, talking the talk or walk the walk, fans then who can see that actually what he's been telling them actually happens on the pitch, the way he wants to play, the intensity, the press, etc., etc. And you're right about that first. I was at that obviously event that you did, and how long did he have with the players before the Turkey game? Got together on the 3 or 4 training sessions. That was it. And it's always in the back of your mind. Well, you know, they have to adapt to a certain way of playing that Craig wants. They don't necessarily play that way at their clubs. They haven't played like that with Wales before, and yet, you know, within that 3 or 4 days, they obviously took it all in and adapted, and I think enjoyed it. That was the thing, enjoyed the intensity within training, etc., because they train as if how they're playing. You know, it's all straight from day one. It's not take your time to get back into it. Boom, right, we're preparing for the game. Everything is tactical. Everything is about the game itself. And they bought into it. And as you say, it paid off in the first couple of matches where, you know, you could see against Turkey what he'd been talking about was actually coming into fruition on the pitch. And credit to the players as well. You know, they actually did buy into it straight away.
Yeah, I always wonder. Well, I always wonder whether, you know, because Craig is still a pretty young guy, whether because the players are so familiar with him as a name, whether that garners the kind of instant respect and the instant admiration before he's even opened his mouth, because, you know, obviously it's a privilege to play for your country and things like that. But maybe, you know, if a manager comes in, not just Wales, any national team who maybe is, you know, sort of 65, 70 for whatever, they're not that familiar with that person or that person's, football career. I always feel like if they see, Craig Bellamy, they know him as a, ex-Liverpool, ex-Cardiff, ex-Manchester City player, played at the highest level. I wonder whether that has an impact on some of those sort of younger players. I obviously don't know. It's just an interesting thought, really.
No, I think, even going back, the FAW have always, or haven't been afraid to give a young manager an opportunity.
No.
Mark Hughes was the first I can recall in terms of a very young manager when he was still playing, and then obviously went to Blackburn and what have you. And obviously they went down the other route with John Toshak, who had all the experience in the world, and having managed, with Real Madrid twice, you don't do that without having some sort of credibility. So, in terms of everything that Toshak had achieved. But then since then, it has been Gary Speed, which, Sheffield United was struggling, wrong end of the Championship when they appointed Gary. Chris Coleman, second division in Larissa, wasn't it, in Greece. Ryan was untried. Pagey stepped in because of everything that was happening around with Ryan and COVID and everything as well at the time. And then now Craig. So I've always been prepared to give young managers an opportunity to learn the trade. I think it's a great place to learn your trade because you don't have the daily routine of the pressure. You have an intense period, and Craig obviously treats it. It's a full-time job. He's out and about, even in between matches, doing this, that, and the other. And he's always been a great one for studying opponents and other countries and their football, and his knowledge is immense. But I think it's a great learning place in terms of media, everything that goes around the game. You have that time to reflect sometimes, which you wouldn't have necessarily in club football, where the demands are Tuesday, Saturday. You don't have time to think. But I think when Craig, most of the players there, and even if the very young ones, their parents would remember Craig as a player and what Craig did as a player, how intense he was as a player, what the quality players, you say, playing for some massive clubs, Liverpool, Newcastle, Manchester City, Celtic, as well as hometown club like Cardiff, starting at Norwich, etc. Always known as a great student of the game, and always turned, when people talk about players who turned up for Wales, I mean, Craig was right at the top there. In difficult times when we weren't very successful, but he was still there, even if he had an injury and the club didn't want him to turn up. He defied that. He's passionate about everything. So I think that passion. I remember in the first meeting, he said to players who didn't know him, you might have heard and read a lot about me, and he said, it's all true. And it broke the ice, it broke the ice, and it was a great introduction, really. But yeah, I think because of who he was, the type of player he was, and the type of person that rubs off, it demands high standards, and I think the players know. You have to adapt to the way Craig was. I mean, he sees different situations for different matches. He's always said that nobody is, if you're not in the squad this time, you might be in next time, because I think he studies the type of player he might want for a certain situation. But I'm sure because of the type of player and person he was, that players respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, even in the Nations League, you could almost see he had a different formation for home games, for away games, for different oppositions. And, even when on that evening, and when I met him, I had never met him before. I knew him sort of by reputation, both on and off the field. I knew some people who had been in and around him, and obviously a lot of ex-footballers, but I didn't know him. And I was shocked that he's actually quite shy. Like initially when you first meet him, which is not what I kind of really expected, but also he was very easy to talk to.
Yeah.
And you always felt like he was listening to you when you were engaging with him and having a conversation with him. But most of all, I could have literally sat there for 3 hours and just talked about tactics and about football and about all those kind of small details about the game. And I found him really, really engaging, and just really, I was shocked by how detail orientated he was when he was, talking about things like tactics. And I think a couple of times, during the event, we kind of had to reel ourselves in a little bit where we were going a bit too deep into the tactics. But I mean, it was fascinating. And I, as someone, who covers Wales and covers Cardiff, and also, does a couple of Wales shows as well now. It's a really exciting time because, you know, I look at the 19s who unfortunately have just fallen 1-0 behind. But, you know, I look at the 19s and what a job Chris Gunter's going. Is he someone who you know, being in and around football and Welsh football for so many years, you obviously will have known Chris well.
Yeah.
Is he someone that you would have thought would have gone on into that sort of managerial and coaching side of things?
I'm not surprised because Chris has always come across as a bright, articulate person, knowing his football, and over the years with Wales, the likes of had real characters over the years. But you think of the likes of Chris Gunter, Neil Taylor, and I think you'd have thought, yes, Gunter in the future might go down that line into coaching and what have you. And it was funny in over the years where, you know, responsibility for press conferences and media and what have you. And if we ever thought we were hitting the buffers and there was something problematic to deal with in the media, I'd always go Guns, and he'd know because he could deal with it. He had that. Yeah. He's a lovely person, quiet and assuming, but a strong character, strong personality. Without, you don't have to shout and bawl to be a strong character, do you? You just be a character by what you do and the way you say things. You can say it. And I think when Chris said things, even if he said it quietly, he had authority when he was saying it and respect, and, you know, what he achieved with Wales. So I'm not surprised that, you know, I think everybody's delighted with the fact that he's on board. And certainly, as you say, they've gone one down now, but there's no doubt that and I think everybody feels there's a talented group of players at that level, and that, you know, Chris has got a good future in coaching. I saw him last week when he came up to announce the squad, you know, and yeah, he's a, you know, one of the better, good person, Chris. You know, a lot of time for him, and I think hopefully he will be a success.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And like we started the show off with, it's a very exciting time for Welsh football, and the expectations have definitely changed. You know, I am I'm 43 now, and you know, coming into 2016, I had very much come to terms with the fact that I was never going to see Wales at a national, you know, a major tournament. I'd come to terms with it. It wasn't like the heartbreak maybe that it had previously been. I'd kind of just assumed, you know, we might go close now and again, but we'll probably always fall short. And since 2016, you're kind of almost expecting to qualify now, and that's a very different dynamic for the managers, for the players, for the, you know, for everyone at the FAW. And I think, you know, I think Noel Mooney deserves a tremendous amount of credit for what he's done since he's came into the FAW. I think he's really acted on the word, you know, acted on the plans, if you like, because whatever field you are in, ultimately it's easy to say what you want to do, but you've also got to then put it into practice and do it. How has it been? Go on. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, go on. Sorry, go on.
I was just gonna ask you about the differences really of, you know, going back to when you were a commentator and covering Wales and working with the FAW. Yeah. The differences in Wales football and also football generally, and just the way everything's changed over the years, really.
Well, when you know, I'm a lot older than yourself, and I was as a fan, I can remember, you know, being at Wrexham in 1975 when we were the only team, men's national team, to actually win a group and qualify for the European Nations Cup, as it was then, and played Yugoslavia away, and then the second leg at Ninian Park, the 1-1 draw, and the Rudi Glochner match, and all this, and then I can also remember, you know, the failures, lights going out at the Vetch. Anfield, there was Anfield in 77, and then you know, games throughout the 80s when we nearly qualified or didn't qualify. It was at Ninian Park when Jock Stein died, etc. The Romania game, the Russia game, and I always enjoyed. There was no doubt it was great. It was one of the highlights covering Wales because despite the fact we weren't qualifying, we had some great players. We had some great results as well. You know, the Germany, the Italy, and even as a fan, you know, beating Czechoslovakia when they were there. Yeah, and beating Czechoslovakia in 1977 when they were European champions, 3-0 at the racecourse. Leighton James outstanding that night. I think Peter Sayer played up front with Nick Deasy. Toshak wasn't available, and everyone saw Peter Sayer as the heir apparent to Kevin Keegan, who was just about to leave Liverpool for the. So I've got great memories of that. Then when I joined the FAW, I think I'd always believed in the potential of the Welsh football, whether it was at club level or whatever. It just needed some success, and that wasn't too much of it around at club level in terms of real success, like getting to the Premier League, like Swansea and Cardiff did, etc., just to kickstart everything. But for Wales to qualify, when I joined, and there's no doubt Noel Mooney's done a fantastic job. But when I joined, Jonathan Ford was the chief executive who got me on board, and we were 117th in the world, playing in front of about 5,000-6,000, and there was apathy, I think, towards the national team. I think there was apathy maybe from the players towards playing for Wales because they didn't feel there was that connection. And I just felt there was certainly a FAW was not held in too high a respect maybe at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember when first thing when they came in, Brian Flynn was manager for 2 games, but they wanted a manager, I think a young manager who had a positive image, young modern image, and Gary fitted the bill. Got him from Sheffield United, and I remember as a crowd, Gary understood that it was more than results to get out of where we were. That results could only do so much. You needed that feeling of belonging. The fans felt part of it, and this, that, and the other. So how did we do that? And we started going around Wales with Gary doing Q&As and this, that, and the other. And Jonathan said at the time, everything, all the money that the FAW had or didn't have would be invested in the men's first team, because the only way we were going to get out of where we were was by qualifying for a major tournament, which brings in the money, which allows you to do other things. And if you think about it, 2011, what happened with Gary, which was devastating for everyone. Chris Coleman came in, we lost 6-1 in Serbia, all this, that, and the other. And yet within 4 years, we're semi-finalists in the Euros. That's quite incredible, really. That's quite incredible in that short space of time and everything that happened, the knockbacks along the way. So on top of that, I think we should have qualified in 2018. I think if we'd have gone in 2018 to Russia, we'd have made a far better job of it than we did in Qatar, because the players were more at their peak. And then we qualified again when, Ryan in his first campaign qualified. And we were unlucky there because of COVID, because it denied the fans the opportunity to really be there. But and then obviously, but you can't live off 2016 forever. You need someone to come in to say, right, that was then. And it's still fantastic because that's the only tournament that we've really been able to go with 20, 25,000 Welsh fans, etc., etc. Everything else has, not been in our favour. But you need someone to come in and say, right, that's fantastic, but we need to kick on to another level now. And what things that the FAW hadn't done before: invested in the women's game, invested in grassroots, invested in facilities, and that's what's kicked on in the last 3 years, because we couldn't, otherwise we might just have stayed, I don't know, still looking back. Now we can look forward more, and you can see the investment in the facilities where I'm at Henshaw now, but investments in grassroots football, etc., etc. So there's a lot happened in the last 3 years, but everything's relevant to its time. When Jonathan came in, we were in a certain position, and then when Noel Mooney's come in, we've built on that. And I suppose whoever comes in after Noel Mooney will have to build on that. That's nothing can stand still. Because in that period you think, what's life going to be without Balo?
Yeah, of course.
So if you can adapt after Balo, you can adapt after anyone. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the thing. And suddenly one camp he's there in Qatar, the next camp when we get to where's Balo? But you've got to adapt then. And, the players have to come in and stand up, and maybe it's more as a team now than one player. The focus is on the team, and you see what people like Harry Wilson in particular have stepped up. And unfortunately he's not here for this camp, but he's developed and what have you. Maybe they take more responsibility and think, right, this is my opportunity now. We're not just dependent. It wasn't just one man, but there's no doubt having Balo made a heck of a difference for us.
Yeah, it's football's an ever evolving thing, and I think obviously with Welsh football, with Wales being such a small country, that evolution is going to always be a bit more dramatic in some ways in terms of the playing staff. So from that 2016 squad, it was obviously a phenomenal squad. Gareth Bale, Aaron Ramsey, people like this, they're going to be very difficult to replace. Ben Davies, still there from that squad and leading like a true leader. Ian, Kevin McCusker has sent in a question. He says, "Is IG the oldest in the Wales camp from Kev the Kitman?"
Put it like this: when Kevin McCusker and myself joined up with the Welsh camp, is the natural age of the team. There's a Kevin McCusker on the kit man. The average age of the team, of the squad, of the staff jumps up significantly. Yeah, I am the oldest member of the staff, and they remind me of that quite a lot, to be fair.
Yeah, it's experience, Ian, isn't it?
At the end of the day. That's the bit. Yeah, experience. I prefer that than the oldest. I'm the most experienced in terms of being around life more than the rest of them, maybe.
That's it. No, it's as we've said, it's very exciting time for Welsh football, and it's really interesting. So I'm not generally due to time, but I'm someone who doesn't watch a lot of women's football. But the Welsh women's team has really kind of caught my eye and really taken my interest over the last couple of years, and I think it's that investment on the pitch, investment in the facilities, but also the investment of spreading the words and getting it out there. They get tremendous crowds, don't they? The women's team, and they're doing very, very well for themselves.
Well, when I joined the FAW, the first game I worked on was up in Kevin Druids in Wrexham when they played Bulgaria. Yamo Matikainen was the manager at the time, and they, I think, beat Bulgaria 8-0. And it was the first time we'd done things like school visits with the women's team. I took Sophie Ingle and Cheryl Foster to a school in Wrexham, Ysgol ID Hewson, and played in front of a crowd about 800. And you thought at the time, oh, that's a decent crowd, especially on the same night. Manchester United were playing Rangers. It was live on television, and obviously Wrexham being there's a lot of United fans living in the Wrexham area. So we thought that was good. And then it's just the investment over the years that's been made by the FAW, and especially in the last 2 or 3 years, huge into the game. The coverage from the BBC, because my argument all the time was, you go and watch a game, whether it was at Cardiff City Stadium or Swansea, and the women were playing, and yet it was England that was shown on network television. So you're seeing England playing on Welsh television. But since BBC Wales have obviously invested time and effort and money into it, they're showing the games live. So these players are becoming well-known household names. They respond as well because they know there's an interest in it. It's built up the crowd. What was it, 17,000, over 17,000 at the Cardiff City Stadium, nearly 7,000 for the game against Sweden at Wrexham. It's really taken off. And in terms of the numbers actually playing the game, is huge. But the opportunity is there now to even increase that in terms of investment, in terms of interest, in terms of audience, and in terms of participation when they take part in the Euros this summer in Switzerland. That's a fantastic platform and a fantastic stage to develop the game and knowledge and interest in the game even further.
Absolutely. And it's like, as I say, and I say this as I try to be as honest as possible, like, for a long time, women's football, it just didn't interest me really. I was, just men's football, probably a sign of where the times were at that point as well. Yeah. But it's been the Welsh women's football team is what has kind of drawn me in to watching it. And I find it really exciting. And when I see the crowds, they're so passionate, and there's, it looks like it's something which is on the up as a whole. And I think that's good for Welsh football overall. When you think of
where it was just 5 years ago, you think where it could be in 5-10 years, where it's just the norm of selling out a stadium to watch, and the players coming through, etc. The investment, it's exciting times. I'd say it's Rhian Wilkinson was barely a year in the post, and she's qualified for League A in the Nations League, and she's taken the team to a finals for the first time ever. So, massive credit to Rhian, and the fact that she was appointed in the first place is obviously an excellent appointment.
It's that evolution that we talked about as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ian, are you okay for a couple of minutes still?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, if you've got to go, it's just I would really like to kind of discuss a little bit about you covering, football in Wales, because I was lucky enough to have Rob Phillips on a few weeks back, and he's most recently, he is the kind of the voice of Welsh football and Cardiff City and stuff like that. But actually, it was when I first started watching Welsh football on TV as a kid, you were the voice of Welsh football, and it's a real privilege for me to be able to speak to people like yourself and Rob and I just really wanted to take you through your career a little bit, really, and just sort of how did you get into commentary and journalism and that side of things? Was that something that you always wanted to do, or?
I always wanted to be involved in sport. If I'm honest, when I was growing up in Colwyn Bay, my ambition was to get a job at Radio City, the commercial station on Merseyside, so I could and live there, and so I could watch Liverpool. And I was brought up in the Clive Tilsley era when he was on, and Richard Keys, Elton Wellesby with a team on Radio City at the time. And then I went to university in Aberystwyth. I studied history and international politics because I had massive interest in history, or modern history. Well, modern history was then. It's be ancient history by now in terms of how long ago I did it. But and as things happen, I met my wife now, she was from Cardiff, and I came down to Cardiff and heard a job advert. Remember, the Cardiff Broadcasting Company, CBC 221 medium wave, and I applied for a job there. And David Lucas was the managing director, and I got the job. And it was a bit of doing everything. I was doing a bit of news, doing a bit of sport, taking copy, everything. And there were real characters at the time, like Phil Suarez was doing the afternoon show, Pete Harris, the Major. And it were great times, and I learned a lot from, good and bad, from people like that. And it were great times. And I was there for about 9 months before I got an opportunity that I was asked to go and join the BBC radio sports team.
Okay. We just seem to have lost Ian, so we'll get Ian back in just a second. I'm not sure, the signal might have just dropped, but hopefully we'll get Ian back in just a second. Bear with us.
If you're hearing this, so are your potential customers. Be heard and reach sports fans across the country. We have advertising opportunities available throughout our programmes, website and commentaries. Working with you, we will create a bespoke package and make sure your message reaches the people you want to hear it. Contact us today to find out how Cymru Sport could help your business. Email contact@cymrusport.cymru.
Welcome back to the Welsh Football Hour. We'll try and get Ian G Hughes back in just a second. Tremendous interview with Ian. Really enjoying chatting to him. Hopefully we can get him back now. It's probably just an internet thing. You okay there, Ian?
Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, it was. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, it was the internet. Must have been. Sorry.
Yeah. No worries at all. So you were just kind of telling us about your sort of early years in going to the BBC radio team.
Yeah, I went there and I was doing some presenting, and then I started doing some commentary midweek matches. It just developed from then. I was doing initially on Radio Cymru in Welsh, and then went to Radio Wales. And then I became I went to the Kirin Cup in Japan in 1992 with Wales. And after coming back, I was appointed football correspondent for BBC Wales. I moved on to television then. Mainly because there was two who were just before me, Terence O'Donoghue sadly died young, and then Ian Brown went to 5 Live, so I was given the opportunity. So I went on to television commentary, and then commentated on Welsh matches, and was looking to commentate on Welsh club matches for the BBC if they were doing well in the FA Cup, like Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham. in those days, and then did a few 5 or 6 years as part of the Match of the Day team when they expanded and got their Premier League highlights. So yeah, that was my period at the BBC, about 22 years. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved being away with. It was different. It was so different then, where as commentators or reporters, you mixed more with the players. You were given more access to the players.
Yeah, of course.
And there wasn't the 24/7 news, and it was mostly sports people dealing with the players. So you respected, that you respected their space. And I remember with Wales, you used to travel with the team, stay in the hotels with the team. And, it wasn't like formal press conferences. You'd be going around a hotel and you'd be sitting down and you'd say, have you got a chance for a quick interview? Yeah. Then you'd have a cup of tea or coffee with them. And, might even the night of the game or after the game, go out with them. And you'd get to know them like that. And I think that was part of the thing that when I got to the FAW was the fact that I knew the players and I knew the managers, in terms of I've been lucky, Gary, Chris, Ryan, Pagey, and now Craig. So there's always been that element of respect and some sort of friendship with them, But thoroughly enjoyed the time. And I loved commentating at, Ninian Park, the Vetch, where you got so much atmosphere. Yeah. And in a way, and at Wrexham, and in a way, this is an absurd thing to say, but the least successful you were, the more you enjoyed it, because you felt you had a point to prove, that you were battling against the elements or what have
Absolutely.
You. And, going down to Ninian Park on a Tuesday night, where my son always used to go down with my father-in-law. I was commentating at the top of the main stand. They were at the bottom watching. And, Tuesday night, Ninian Park, even if it was just however many thousands there, 4,000 or 5,000 even, it was still a great atmosphere. It really loved old-fashioned access to players, there were characters and this, that, and the other. Now, hey, I'm on the other side, and the access to players is limited and what have you. And you feel guilty sometimes, because I remember how fortunate I was in that period to work in that period when you were given the opportunity to get to know players and managers properly.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you say, like access to players these days is very limited. I was quite fortunate that during COVID, because a lot of players and ex-players, they didn't have anything to do, so they were quite happy to jump on. So me and Andy Campbell, we each had a different footballer or manager on each week. Yeah, and that was for me personally, that was such a pleasure. I got to speak to people who I'd never would have probably dreamt of speaking to, like just simple things like that. Emil Heskey and people like that is. Not just being able to interview them, but also to spend, an hour and a half really having a conversation with them on a range of subjects. It was obviously a privilege, but it was kind of cool because they were out of that sort of media trained bubble, which I'm assuming was what it was like for you, back in the day, because they didn't switch into the sort of the Sky or the BBC or that sort of mode where, they get asked the same sort of question and it's the same answer, because it was a conversation. You got to know them a little bit more. It was a real privilege. But I'm assuming that's what it was like for you, was the point I was going to make. Yeah,
I mean, you'd be, in terms of players from that era, when I first started, it was, you spoke with them and you said, look, if I want to get hold of you in between matches, and they just give you their number. So you formed that bond and that contact, so you could go with them. They started to know you as a person, and I think a lot of it was built on trust. You always understood, right? And I always used to, when I did interviews, it was about the football. It was nothing else. The other stuff, whatever you heard or what, it didn't bother me at all. Anyhow, it was about the football and what have you. That was built on trust. So you started to talk, as you say, you'd do your interview, you'd have a cup of tea or coffee, and you start to talk about other things. What was good at the time, and I think it's always good. We were lucky that, say at Cardiff, Swansea or Wrexham, working for BBC Wales, that a lot of the players might go on to play for bigger clubs or Wales. but because you'd made that contact with them initially when they were at their maybe first club or Welsh club and were young and they trusted you and knew you, they would always recognize that when they went on to bigger things. So that helped in the future, like someone like Aaron when he was at Cardiff at 16 doing stuff, and suddenly when he went to Arsenal, he didn't change in terms of we had to go then through the Arsenal press office or whatever. But when you got the interview, he gave you the time, and it's just the same, So that was great for you as a young commentator or reporter at the time to have access to those players. And of course, when in the first series of matches that I did in the 1980s, people like Neville Southall, Ian Rush, Kevin Ratcliffe. I remember in 1985 sitting in the harbour in Helsinki. We played in Finland. We lost 1-0. Terry Orth said at the time it was one of the worst days in Welsh football. But the day before on the harbour, I'm sitting down. There was a commentator. You might remember him on 5 Live. Ron Jones, Welshman, great commentator, and he was a great help to me as a young reporter and commentator at BBC Wales. And we sat in. Ron knew Ian Rush and Kevin Ratcliffe. I didn't at the time. We sat in the harbour in Helsinki and they come up to us and say, do you mind if we join you for a cup of tea? And I'm thinking, do I mind if you join us for a cup of tea? This is incredible. 2 great players, Liverpool and Everton, were the best teams in Europe at the time. And these 2 fantastic Welsh players. So you got to know them like that. And that was out of camp. That was in the harbour in Finland. You start to talk and that held you in good stead, for future engagement when you wanted to do interviews and stuff with them. But that access isn't there today, unfortunately. It's more detached.
No. Yeah, and it's just the nature of the beast, I suppose, isn't it? With social media and obviously throughout the sort of 90s and 2000s, tabloids became a lot more problematic as well. So I think players became more wary of just journalists generally because they didn't want to get stitched up or taken out of context, which is understandable.
There was 24/7 news came into it, wasn't there? There was more demand for this, that, and the other, and it became more difficult. So they had to be protected from that, I suppose. And the mobile phone coming in. If you go out, people,
camera phones, isn't it?
Yeah, whatever, So it's made life difficult for them, maybe to just be able to enjoy themselves as they did, maybe in the past generations of footballers were able to do.
Absolutely right. Ian, before I just let you go, 2 quick questions. High point and low point of your kind of commentating career?
The high point of
or even favourite moment. It didn't have to be a high point.
Favourite moment, and it's ironic. It is ironic now because I'm working with him. But Craig's goal against Italy.
Yes.
And I know it's a topic of debate with fans that they don't want to play at the Principality, etc., etc. But when it was full, and when we were doing well, and that night, the Manic Street Preachers before the game, Bryn Terfel singing, John Charles introduced to the Welsh and Italian fans that night, and tears streaming down his face. I mean, that stands with me. That's outstanding. And you think this is after the Lord Mayor's show, but then we won 2-1, and Craig's goal that night. It doesn't. Euros, 2 Euros in a World Cup I've been privileged to go to, but it's difficult to beat that night in terms of the emotion of who we were playing, who we were beating, and 75,000 there as well. That would have to be the standout for me, I think. That
game was simply incredible. I remember it very well. It was it was a very emotional night. Incidentally, one of the most I don't even know if it was emotional. I always remember playing at the Millennium Stadium, or the Principality as it is now, where I think Robbie Savage might have been captain against Northern Ireland, and you could see during the national anthems, you could see that he was like so emotional. He had tears in his eyes.
Yeah,
and I think he got sent off after about
with
10 minutes.
David Healy. Was it David Healy?
Yeah.
I can't remember who was an altercation, but he was sent. Just the one. He was the one sent off. He got into it.
That's right. Yeah. But it was just you could see the emotion on Robbie's sort of face, and even in the national anthems and stuff. That one always sticks with me.
But then there was always the downside of when we were playing there in front of 10, 15,000. I can imagine when the players used to run out, the only people they would see would be the media and the broadcasters in one stand. So there was the... and if you asked about the down... Growing up in North Wales, I used to go and watch Liverpool, but the North Wales Football League team was Wrexham. And my father was a Wrexham fan. My father-in-law, my brothers, and we used to go, and watch Wrexham quite a lot from about 1969 onwards. And I always enjoyed going there. And then I was there in Lincoln. They'd already gone down, but it was their last game in the Football League when they won 4-2. And I commentated that day. And that was a bad day because I couldn't believe that the year before they'd beaten Boston to stay in the Football League. And that was one of the highs because I thought, wow, at least they've stayed in. This won't happen again. And 12 months later, they were going down. So that was a particularly bad day. And then and I thought, well, it won't be too long before they're back. And the first game in the conference, they beat Stevenage 5-0. And I always thought, before, finishing with commentary or at the BBC, I wanted to be there to commentate on them getting back into the Football League. And of course, I never knew it would take 15 years and I'd long gone by then. But that was a down point because that was sad seeing a club who, shouldn't have been in that position and because of mismanagement off the field had been allowed to go into that situation and they were going out of the Football League. That was a sad day. Yeah. It was a low point in terms of commentating that day and then having to get the interviews after.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Who, played up like Neil Roberts, Chris Llewellyn, who were all there at the time.
It's just on Wales as well. I look back and, I look at those teams with Neville Southall and Ian Rush and Mark Hughes and Craig and, Robbie Savage and Ryan Giggs, Dean Saunders, all these players who I kind of grew up with. And you look back and you think, God, how did we not qualify for a tournament? Kevin Ratcliffe, I think sometimes like the older or the younger generation, they don't quite realize like Ian Rush and Kevin Ratcliffe, Mark Hughes, they weren't just good Premier League or Division 1 footballers. These were guys who were world-class footballers playing for, Juventus or Barcelona and Everton in their pomp. You do look back sometimes and look at it and think, God, how did we not qualify for anything? But
especially during that period, Northern Ireland qualified a couple of times and Republic were qualifying, and you thought, well, we've got better players than them.
Scotland,
I think in terms of what's happened recently, though, the path to qualification is easier, isn't it? In terms of you first, second, and the playoff that didn't exist. And in terms of, I think we had the playoff with Russia, didn't we? But which we didn't win. But in the past, you had to win I remember, as I mentioned earlier, the 75 squad or team. They qualified for the last 8 but it was only 8. It was straight into a quarter-final knockout stage against Yugoslavia, etc., which Czechoslovakia won it in the end, beating West Germany on penalties. But, it was maybe the path to qualification. But you do look at and people always say Neville Southall, Ian Rush, Mark Hughes, Giggsy was coming through, Speeds was coming through. How on earth we didn't qualify for, say, the 1994 World Cup? And people say, oh, well, the rest of the team. But the rest of the team... Dave Phillips, Barry Horn, they would all be playing what is now Premier League football on a regular basis. So they were all playing First Division, apart from, I think, Mark Hazelwood was maybe at Bristol City, but, Eric Young and all these players, Mark Bowen, they were still playing First Division football. So, you look back and you do wonder how we didn't qualify in that period when we had those players. And I'm sure had we qualified, I'm pretty sure we would have done quite well. I mean, I know Romania qualified in that. That's the standout with everything that happened that night on and off the pitch. But they were a very, very good side as well with Hagi, Petrescu, or Petrescu and all these players. They were a very good side.
Yeah. Do you think football's improved, or like generally speaking, or do you think it's worse? Like sometimes I look at the Premier League and I look at football as a whole, and I think 20 years ago, there was more, I don't know how to explain it, like more just natural footballers, if that makes sense, like a Rooney or a Ronaldinho or these types of players. Seems like they were more common back in the day than they are now. And I can't work out, I go back and forth on it, whether I think football in terms of quality was better then or now. But I'd be interested in your view on it.
I think it's a difficult one in terms of obviously preparation, fitness, nutrition, everything that goes around football has improved, I presume. But I just think everything's relative to its time. What I for someone like myself, what I find about it is it's become more detached from everyday life and from reality. Maybe,
Yeah.
you know, you always felt that was still that connection between the fan and, you know, in terms of, people talk about the dominance of Liverpool in the 1970s or early 80s and what have you, but they were challenged by Ipswich. They were challenged by Derby County. They were challenged by, obviously, Nottingham Forest. They were challenged by Ron Atkinson's West Bromwich Albion. Well, I know Forest are doing well now, but unfashionable clubs at the time. So you felt even if you came up, you know, teams could go, even went to challenge for the Football League as it was then. Now, look at what's happening. The 3 teams come up, they're going back down. It's very, very difficult. So I think, I think the people like that uncertainty in sport. I think, and I think more and more now. I still, and people say, oh, you know, you're old-fashioned and you whatever your age and this, that, and the other. But for me, and I watch the Champions League. Well, actually, I don't watch much of the Champions League. European Cup. It was the champions of the country that was in. And that was it. That's what made it was European Cup. And if you got knocked out in first round, tough. Liverpool got knocked out by Nottingham Forest after they'd won it. Real Madrid were knocked out by AC Milan. That's life. And I thought there was something special about your European Cup, and that is it. Now it's open to, you know, they could be 17 from England or whatever. You think, come on, you know what we're trying to do here. But that's my age. Maybe for the younger audience, they love it and what have you. But I still think there's a lot when the unfashionable smaller clubs can challenge and still have that hope. And I think that's what's gone in football now. That's whether it's better or not. I don't know. A lot of people my age would say, "Oh, it was better in the past," etc., etc. I don't know. I don't know.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Like I look at, you know, I always go back to Cardiff City versus Leeds. That was a game where I was, you know, in my late teens, early 20s.
Is that the FA Cup? The FA Cup.
Yeah. And just like it's such a special day because they were top of the Premier League and, you know, everything which went around it. And then I look back a little bit further and I remember Mickey Thomas scoring a free kick for Wrexham against Arsenal in the, you know, like I think it was like 95th minute in the FA Cup. I feel like those special FA Cup moments, whilst they do happen, you know, now and again. You saw Plymouth beat Liverpool this year, and they just don't quite feel the same as they did back then. And I think money and you know the TV coverage and stuff was probably got an impact on that. But it's like we talked about earlier. It's the evolution of everything, I guess. And
it is, and I suppose, you know, when you're talking about those type of games and what have you, and you know, you spoke about Liverpool then getting knocked. I mean, I go back. The World Cup was every 4 years, and you only saw those players. You only saw a Pele or a Rivellino or the first World Cup properly I remember was the 1970 World Cup when Brazil won it. But you wouldn't see some of the players until 4 years later. You wouldn't see the Johan Cruyffs until 4 years later. And you appreciated it more. The FA Cup final was one of the few live games, so it was a massive game. Now you take it for granted because he's on every day, every night, every league can be seen, you know. And you mentioned Liverpool there. They lost to Plymouth, but it was a mixture of what the fringe players and youth team players. But I go back to even the late 60s when Bill Shankly was manager and Liverpool lost to Watford, who were in just above about 18th in the old, what would be the second division, what would be the championship now. Barry Endine scoring a goal in the 5th or 6th round of the FA Cup. And on the back of that defeat, Shankly ripped up the whole team and started the process of rebuilding Liverpool. But big names, Ron Yates, Ian St John, Roger Hunt, because they won't put the reserves out or the youth team out for a cup game. The cup meant something. So when you've been brought up in that era, if you ask if it's better or not, you're brought up in a certain era. It's very difficult sometimes to think, actually, is it better now? I preferred it back then. I don't know. But
Yeah.
as I say, the younger generation would feel completely. But I could get up on a Saturday morning with my mates if we weren't playing ourselves in Colwyn Bay, get on the train to Chester, and either go on to Manchester or get the train from Chester to Rock Ferry underground and up to Liverpool and go and watch Liverpool, Everton, Manchester United, whatever, and just queue outside for either Gladys Street, Stretford End or the Cop, and get in and not have to think, oh, I've got to book, try and get tickets 6 months in advance. You know,
never get that now, would you?
You wouldn't get that now. So, you know, you can't just rock up at Anfield now and hope to get in, can you?
No. Right, Ian, thank you so much for joining me, mate. I've got two very quick questions, which Rob put in the chat. He just said, do you know why that the Wales under-19s are playing at the same time as the first team on Saturday? It seems like a strange one.
I think it's they're playing at the same time, are they? I think it's completely down to our kickoff times are not dictated by us; they're dictated by UEFA. And obviously the World Cup is a FIFA qualifying tournament, UEFA under-19s. That's
they just got to do it. You got to play when you play.
Certainly, if it was down to us, we wouldn't arrange 2 games at the same time. But that is that's out of our hands, unfortunately.
Of course. And the other thing, which actually Rob asked as well, was about grassroots football, and basically the rules are different in England to Wales for kids. So, for instance, under 10s in Wales now, they play with they've added throw-ins and back passes for under 10s this season. Whereas in England, this starts at under 8s. So do you think, obviously it's the different FAs and things like that, but do you think that gives a long-term advantage to the English players over the Welsh players, that maybe they're progressing through the different types of football and the different levels of football at a slightly earlier age?
I'm not avoiding the question. It's not my level of expertise. There are people far better, more qualified than myself who would give you a definitive answer to that and explain why maybe that happens in England and what happens in Wales. I'm not avoiding. I don't want to say something that, is completely wrong, but there are far more qualified people at the FAW than myself to talk about that. I'm sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's just Rob will shout at me if I don't ask you. See,
no, at least Mark Hughes always used to tell me it because they call me IG, and I say, Mark, I'm going to ask you this. That's when he was manager of Wales, and he used to say, IG, you can ask me anything, but I don't have to answer. And I've always remembered that. He says to the players, they can ask you anything, you don't have to answer. But I'm not avoiding the answer. I'm not qualified to answer. That's the difference, hopefully.
Absolutely. No, in fairness to we've got Jack Sharp coming on soon, who is the head of grassroots football, I believe.
He's the head of domestic, isn't he? The
domestic football,
Cymru Premier is.
Yes, yeah. So maybe he'll be able to answer the question.
He might give the same answer as me. I'll give him a ring now. No,
we'll keep asking people until someone knows the answer. But Ian, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. And I know, I've been sort of constantly texting you, trying to sort it out since probably since Christmas. But
it's been my fault. I've said yes, and then I'm reminded by other people, oh, you've got that. Oh, sorry, but I knew I wasn't going anywhere this week because I'm in the hotel. So,
no, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you hanging around for a bit longer as well. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Enjoyed it.
Really appreciate it. Take care, my friend, and I'll speak to you soon.
You. Look after yourself. Speak soon. Bye.
Ian G Hughes, ladies and gentlemen. What a gentleman. Really interesting guy. I could speak to Ian forever and ever. I find him really interesting. I grew up with Ian G Hughes commentating on Welsh football. And it's just a real privilege for me to be able to speak to him. So just to round off the show this evening, I thought it'd be nice if we could hear from, who should we hear from? Let's hear from Neco Williams on stepping up as one of us.
I think it gets to a stage where you have to step up. Like you said then, I'm still relatively young, as people would say, but I think I've gained a lot of experience over my career so far, club and with internationals. I think I'm at a stage now where I do have to step up and be more of a senior player. I was once that young kid coming through the door, and I used to look up to all the senior players and get their advice and help them out. And I feel like now I'm in a stage where I need to do the same to them. And now I feel like I can help these young lads with the experiences I've experienced so far in my career.
So interesting. Like Neco Williams is only 23 or 24 himself, but he is one of the senior players for Wales. I'm really excited about this Wales camp, and we'll see how Craig Bellamy's Reds go along this period. Thank you so much to Ian G Hughes for joining me. Thank you so much to Jamie Anderson for joining me for the Cardiff City World Hour, where we took a bit of a deep dive into Cardiff City season. Really appreciate it as always. We'll be back next Wednesday live on Cymru Sport. And of course, don't forget, if you want Cardiff City and Wales content, then check out Cardiff City World, where we'll have a Wales preview as well as the Cymru and Build podcast every day this week as we go through into the international break. Take care, and I'll see you next Wednesday.
If you're hearing this, so are your potential customers. Be heard and reach sports fans across the country. We have advertising opportunities available throughout our programmes, website and commentaries. Working with you, we will create a bespoke package and make sure your message reaches the people you want to hear it. Contact us today to find out how Cymru Sport could help your business. Email contact@cymrusport.cymru.